Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And next week we are getting the Invasion Chapter 2 with the shareable bookmarks. I think that's pretty cool. Normally we'll also get the new transition effect when it comes to the jump gate. You guys saw that with the mass test. And what's also pretty exciting is that in the Invasion Chapter 2, it's now also posted on the updates website, there will be a part where we'll have to choose between helping the empires or helping the Triglavians when it comes to at least part of that content. So I'm still not sure what to do. It's been super quiet about that, and that's kind of interesting. It's definitely completely different from what CCP has been doing in the years before. They basically went silent on the new content. With the invasion, it is really stuff that we'll have to explore and discover when it hits the queue and not before on CC or from dev blogs or anything like that. So we'll probably have our work cut out for us once it hits the queue, and we might even lose some ships and get into trouble a little bit when it comes to that new content. So I am looking forward to all of that. I will take my time, mostly play solo I think, but we'll see. Perhaps this new content forces you into group play, and I will see how we try to handle that. As always, we'll take a quick look at the new Eden store, because CCP did announce a new skin, the Zento Isideku combined skin. Very yellow for I think pretty much the entire Caldari line. I like it when there's at least some black to offset the really light colors that are here. So stuff like the eagle, the jackdaw with the black wings is pretty cool. Hawk, I like that as well. Manticore really set apart a little bit. And then where I don't really like it that much is the rock. I feel like that one and the raven, I think those need like a little bit more black to offset the very light nature of the white with the yellow there. But it's a new skin. It is pretty cool. It's for the entire Caldari line, and other than that we are not seeing anything too special. No sales or anything like that, which means that we can jump straight into the market. As always, we'll start with plex and stuff, and that's going to be at 2:30. Like that. Let's get started with the plex themselves. You may already have seen from the ticker actually having a hard time. Look at the price history. We are continuing to decline. The average prices are continuing to get away from 3.5 million yet again. Really counter to my expectation. Look at the double dip to 325 here, August, September. Pretty much what you would expect, and then we get this slow increase that started in October, but in November the exact reverse has happened, and we're basically back at that October low point. Current prices in GTA 3.6 million for the sellers, 3.3 million, just above that for the buyers. And then if we go to the player owned trade hubs, yep, sellers are below 3.5 million ISK, and buyers are just a bit above 3.35 million. So they went up a little bit, but not by that much. But the sell prices do go down by about 150,000 ISK. So there's clearly still pressure on the price of plex at the moment. This is not what I personally expected, so we'll really see if the Invasion Chapter 2 we'll see some marketing behind it. There's also still EVE London, if I'm not mistaken, that's dropping this weekend, so perhaps we'll get some announcements there, but I personally don't expect it. And yeah, we'll see if Invasion Chapter 2 can bring the hype back, and if it will have an impact on the price of plex. Next up, the multiple pilot train certificate. That is interesting. That looks like too fast to not be a sale. Not really seeing it in the volumes, but price 1.5 billion about 10 days ago to a week ago. A bit below that, we are now talking less than 1.4 billion for the sellers, 1.3 billion for the buyers, and in GTA a bit below 1.5 billion. It could be. These are not that big in numbers actually. So really, a decline in price that's this sharp on the training certificates, and it doesn't look like a sale. It looks like a little bit of dumping actually, because you can see here GTA a bit below 1.5 billion. That's pretty much this price range here, which usually wins out. And then you have yeah, very steep competition in the perimeter trade tower, going down 1.43, 1.42, 1.40, and then 1.378, a couple of them, causing the price to drop quite steeply. Interesting, we haven't really seen that very often, a sharp decline in the price of multiple pilot trading certificate just from dumping, not from a sale. Then you get a much bigger volume spike when it's a CCP sale. We also still have the skill extractors to look at. Same pattern as with Plex, slowly moving away from the 400 million average price. We're now talking 393 million for the sellers, 386 million for the buyers. And in Jita, we're still at 407 million, but it does also indicate that, yeah, for these types of items, the Plex stuff, the perimeter trade towers are definitely taking over a lot of the trades. After that, we have the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors. Those went up a little bit delayed basically from Plex. You can see that Plex had this increase second half of October. Then the large scale injectors only started to increase in price here in November, but also already declining. So it looks like the continued pressure on Plex is starting to show up in the injector market as well. 816 million for the sellers, 793 for the buyers. Average price, well, on some days it's below 800 million ISK, so you can actually grab these from the buy orders as well, apparently. Very interesting to see this pressure continued after basically what now looks like a May to June bubble up to 1 billion ISK. That's 20% loss right here, and we're just continuing to meander around this range for now with no clear direction. Next up, we have these small scale injectors. Alright, different movement. Large scale injectors, you can see the pressure. Small scale injectors flat with a slight uptrend at the tail end here. We are talking 165 million for the sellers, 156.5 million for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin. And so here, a much flatter chart on the 5-day moving average, pretty much a hesitant market yet again. And then we have the daily alpha injectors that are continuing to decline on sales volumes at least. I'm not sure if it is even more sales, but this is a 1-year low point. So if you're looking for a purchase below the entire chart right now, 37 million for the first seller, 37.5 for most, 33.5 million for the buyers. If the average price is somewhere between that, we are talking 34.5 for instance, you can definitely buy some very, very cheap daily alpha injectors. The risk, basically this market is much more niche than everything else because it is for alpha characters exclusively. So don't go too crazy on the volumes there either, but this is clearly a CCP dive of the price, and so it would make sense to invest in that at least a little bit. Next up, the mineral market coming in at, let's say 8 minutes to keep it round. There we go. We'll start with titanium. You may already have seen from the ticker that the decline continues after a very sharp rise back to 6 ISK. We are going back down to 5 ISK. With all haste, apparently, in Jita we are selling for 517. Buyers are coming in at 5 ISK. And the good news is we're not seeing the 2-3 billion ISK volumes here anymore. 500,000, couple 100,000 is what we usually see. So we are already seeing the market starting to decide that we're not going to keep dumping more titanium the closer we get to 5 ISK. So in all likeliness we'll bounce back from this again. What I do think is that we will start to decline in extremes, and that will probably meet at around 5.5 ISK for titanium, which is not good. Even I'd say 6 ISK is good, 5 is half okay, and then 5 ISK that's yeah, well, just like the market decides, a price where I would personally hoard my titanium waiting for a better price. So that seems to be the dynamic in titanium right now. Once the price shoots up to 6 ISK, you get massive dumping. This drives the price back down very quickly, but as people start to learn those margins, I think we'll just start to fluctuate more and more within those ranges, and we'll probably meet around 5.5. For pyrite, we had a pretty good week last week, right, going up to 5.5 ISK. Bit of pressure at the tail end, but we're still staying well away from the average prices. You can basically see the 1-year trend here going from 3.5 ISK to 5 ISK in a pretty smooth line, and while we can continue to basically keep expecting that actually to continue. If you look at this 5-day moving average from any of the low points to the current point, it clearly still indicates an upswing in the pyrite market. 480 for the sellers, 469 for the buyers. It is a pretty small and steady increase in price, so don't expect to be able to make 3 trades or anything like that, but just know that if, like me, you have not been selling any pyrite but you've been hoarding it, well, you are getting the best price in a year for it at this point. It's still terrible. 5 ISK for pyrite, historically speaking, is still a really low price, but you gotta keep in mind, of course, the whole dynamic when it comes to minerals has changed, and so perhaps this could be a good time to start to sell, because what I'm seeing here in this chart, first half of the year, pretty steady around 4 ISK, we've been staying there. Then second half of the year, we've got this increase in price with some really nice periods of a couple months where we go from 4 to 4.5, then from 4.5 we try to make our way to 5 ISK, but now you can see a bit more volatility, volumes more volatile as well, so this might be the creation of a peak, I'm not sure, and yeah, it's something to think about if you're holding some pyrite stocks, excuse me. Next up, we've got Mexilon. That was not doing good, pretty much the exact opposite. First half of the year holding on to a really good price, 55 to 60 ISK. Not bad, when even went to 65 in June, but then the decline started with the Gnostic blackouts basically through the summer here. Massive decline down to 1 year low point of 40 ISK, and we are still there. 39.92 for the sellers, 38 ISK for the buyers, so just below 40 ISK is where the market is settling for Mexilon. And here again you can see then the volatility, bit volumes up and down, so the market here isn't sure if we should continue that decline. Apparently not, and I'm kind of seeing the same opposite pattern right here with the hesitation in the last couple of months for pyrite. So when it comes to Mexilon, I think we're reaching bottom prices, but me personally, I'm not selling any Mexilon here. I'm waiting for like 50 at least before I would sell. Might be a long wait for me, but I am willing to wait it out for Mexilon at this point. 1 year low point, I definitely try to avoid selling at these prices. This is not the time to panic, I think. We'll see how things evolve. After that, we've got Noxium, very similar chart, of course. Really good first half of the year, holding on to 300 ISK, going back down to 225, and we're back at that low point as well. 225 for most sellers, 218 for the buyers. So again, very narrow margin. You get this hesitation going back up to 250, back down, volume spikes, things like that. The market is trying to find its new range, unfortunately, but it is pretty low, of course, so I am personally not selling Noxium either. After that, we have Zydrine, which slowly moving away from 500 again. Tried to defend that for a very long time. Then the camel's back was broken. We went down to 450. Tried to make its way back, but the pressure is just not doable. I think we will end up settling at 450. 465 for the sellers, 450 for the buyers of Zydrine. So clearly pressure in the month of November so far. Then we've got Megasite, which was in a far worse place. 1 year low point, just breezing through the 350 mark here. 329 for the sellers, 319 for the buyers. So that is, yeah, Mexilon at a 1 year low point here as well. It's moon mining here. That is, of course, the main reason. You can clearly see that from the volumes as well, in my opinion, at least. 1.1 million, 2 million, another 8 million here, another million, another 6 million. These are, in my opinion, volumes that are being mined from individual moons and just brought straight to the market, causing all that competition and extra supply to drive the price down. Then we have Morphite, the outlier, of course, that is continuing to decline after a very strong summer, up to 13,000 ISK. We are still above 10k, but the buyers are getting down to that price range at this point. 11,000 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers. Historically speaking, I think 10,000 ISK has always been the average price. Above that, we're talking a good price. Below that, we're talking a bad price. Of course, this has been a rather exceptional situation where the first half of the year has been spent around 7,500 ISK. You could have really made a very big trade on this one, buying in May, selling in September, but also buying in January, February, March in the first half of the year. It is just the nature of the EVE Online market, in my opinion, that we quite often need a lot of patience when it comes to these investments, and the situation can often look really dire, really desperate. So you can imagine, for instance, that Mixon can continue to languish around 40 ISK for a very long time, just like Morphite. Excuse me, I need to go to the chart here. Morphite languished around 7,500 for a very long time, but when the comeback happens, those that have been hoarding Morphite and have been purchasing Morphite, hopefully rather slowly at these bottom prices, are of course making a big bang, and they've been able to do so basically through the entire month of September at the very best prices. And then now we are declining, but we're still obviously well above average and still in a pretty decent range for Morphite. Next up, the PI market coming in at 1535. Let's take a look at these advanced broadcast nodes. One advanced PI material that basically managed to defend its average 2 million range pretty well, and breaks down at the tail end here. We are back well below that, just below 2 million for the sellers, 1.85 million for the buyers, basically trading below average. This range 1.9 to 2.1 million is not that great, but you can clearly tell that from time to time oversupply does dominate these markets for the advanced PI materials. I think one of the big reasons is that from time to time people expect CCP to come out with a new structure, and for now they're really focused on new player experience and then the Triglavian stuff, and it's still new ships that are coming out for the Triglavians, and thus the advanced PI material quite often basically gets overproduced, and then it can go down to like 1.8 million by some really cheap broadcast nodes. But just like what I said before, we may need quite a bit of patience for stocks of advanced PI materials to find highs. So we need something like an announcement from CCP, and right now the horizon, in my opinion, would be FanFest. Perhaps in the next FanFest in April, CCP might announce something around structures, but for now I personally don't expect it. So if you do want to invest in this, I would say be very patient, wait for 1 year low points, and then don't buy everything that you want straight away. Just buy small volumes to slowly build up your stocks at ever better prices if possible. For the refined PI materials, we've had a picture of very bad fall, September, October, mostly for most of them, like here with the refined with the construction blocks, going down to a 1 year low point of like less than 9,000 disc, almost 8,000 disc here in mid-October. We've been slowly recovering from that, but it's more nuanced because a lot of the fuel-related PI materials have actually been doing really well. So it's definitely still a mixed picture here as well, but we're starting to see some data points above 10k for construction blocks. These are the average daily prices, so we're still slowly recovering here now. 10,400 for the sellers, 9,000 disc for the buyers. It's still a decent margin. We're obviously still trading below average, but you can see that the recovery is happening. Then we get consumer electronics, very same thing here, right? September, October, very difficult. Even here in November, a 1 year low point of 10,000 disc, but we are, I think, slowly recovering. Sellers are back up to 12,000 disc, which on the chart is very close to the average. It's just the buyers that are still down to 11, well, up to 11,200 actually in the last week apparently. So we're recovering here as well pretty slowly, but we're obviously oversupplied, not enough demand, which means that the buyers have driven the prices down quite a bit. Coolants, if I'm not mistaken, was a different story. Exactly, here you can see not a super strong but still a decent summer, and then September, October we actually have a couple of spikes up to 14,000 disc, and we are currently selling for back down to 12,500 on most of them, 10,500 for the buyers, but this is basically back to an average price for coolants. Maybe a little bit low on the buy orders here, but I think this is all very manageable for this market. Next up, we've got enriched uranium, which, well, same thing, right? Actually going up through the summer, very strong September, declining back to the average 14k through October and November. But here at the tail end, this is definitely quite jarring, going down from 14,000 to 13,000 on average. We even have some data points at 12, so I'm expecting sellers at 13k. It's a bit above that, buyers at 12k. And what is noticeable, of course, is the lack of demand here. Buyers are drying up, which is going to put more pressure on enriched uranium. So we might be in for basically a reverse situation. You can clearly see that coolants are recovering from their above average prices as well. Enriched uranium is under pressure, and it's the exact opposite trend in the non-fuel refined materials, which are slowly going back up. Integrity response drones, another advanced PI material, so mostly I know these from being tied to structures, clearly struggling as well. 2.2 million, yeah, 2.29 million for the sellers, 2.13 million for the buyers, clearly still trading below average. But let's see if the trend continues here. Actually, I have to say, despite mechanical parts also suffering that September-October dip, it recovered very quickly to 11k in November, but now at the tail end you can clearly see we're back down to less than 10,000 on average, and it's sellers that are down to less than 10k as well, 9,400 for the buyers, a bit more of them here. Nuclear reactors, yeah, a very difficult PI material to gauge because you can clearly see that the volume sometimes drop to zero, currently trading well below average as well. 91,000 for the sellers, 68,000 disc for the buyers. If you'll try to find that on the chart, is around here. Yeah, pretty low, not a market that I would invest in because of the terrible volumes. We've got actually, I'm just right here on the fly, remove. We're gonna take that one out. If you have something that you find very interesting in the PI market that you want to replace nuclear reactors, let me know. But I personally think that the volumes here are so bad that I would really not consider buying nuclear reactors here. So that one is out. If you want a replacement, feel free to put candidates in the comments. I'll think about it. Next up, we've got the organic mortar applicators. Again, advanced PI, clearly struggling. Are we below 1 million on average? Yes, a bit just above 1 million for the sellers, 990,000 for the buyers. And despite that, right, super narrow margin around the 1 million, you get average prices showing up below 1 million, which means that pretty much everyone is willing to dump to 990k at this point. Next up, we've got the robotics. All right, similar pattern to mechanical parts, right? June, July, actually a peak, decline through this. Actually, I think mechanical parts had a stronger summer, but we had this September, October dip again to 90k. Bit of a recovery right here in November, but it's not to last. 92,000 for the sellers, 86,000 for the buyers. Quite a bit of selling happening here again in robotics. So clearly we get pressure pretty much across the board on the fuel related PI materials. And let's see, we still have superconduction and test sculptures to take a look at next. So advanced PI material, self-harmonizing power core. Of course, same pattern, 1.9 million on average here, 2 million for the sellers, 1.85 million for the buyers. Clearly below average. Superconductors, all right, bit of a dump at the tail end as well. All right, if that one would have recovered, it would have been a clear trend, but this one is breaking with that. Unfortunately, sellers at 11k, buyers well below 10,000 disc, trading a lot below average. Test sculptures is continuing its recovery though, heading for 9,000 disc on average here, 5-day moving average even almost reaching that. So very nice uptrend through October, August, September. So a bit of a dip here in October, but really recovering quite nicely. Almost 10,000 disc for the sellers, 8,400 disc for the buyers. And you can see a bit of a lack of supply. There's going to be a bit more here around JITA, but it's not that big in volume. So clearly with a very, very bad April, May, where for instance our robotics peaked, test sculptures was in a very dire spot, 6,000 disc for a couple of months. Production has basically moved from test sculptures to other more affordable or more profitable PI markets. And as a result, we now see some pressure here, and we actually see a nice recovery in test sculptures. That does happen. It always felt really risky to try and buy these test sculptures for 6,000 disc here. I mean, you had a chart that was just declining, and we were stuck here. But look at that nice recovery. You could have bought these for 6,000 disc. Right now, you're selling them for almost 10,000 disc. Patience really does pay off in EVE Online. And purchasing at one year low points often works out very well. Wetware mainframes, again breaking down to 2 million, well below average. 2 million for the sellers, 1.9 million, a bit above that for the buyers. So the PI market, we're seeing quite a bit of pressure, especially in the fuel-related PI materials, and I'm seeing some recovery in the refined PI materials that are decently easy to produce, but that have struggled through the October-September months here. So interesting. Any predictions or any thoughts on that pattern? For me, well, we're seeing pretty low demand, so I'm again hoping that if we see a successful chapter 2 and then we see a recovery in plex prices there, that we might actually see demand for PI pick up, and thus we could recover in prices. So if you do see 1 year low points like here, superconductors being bought for well away from 10,000 ISK, it could be worth looking into grabbing some stocks at these prices. You may be in for a long wait, but we may be in a similar pattern as what was happening here with the sculptures, and it now looks like that was a nice opportunity. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 25.25. Haven't really heard a lot. Well, actually, yes, I did saw a couple of posts of brawls and wars happening in Nullsec. Also, like some corporations leaving the Imperium, or one corporation leaving the Imperium. So perhaps some strugglings are starting to happen there. Let's see. I wouldn't say that it's completely calm waters, complete blue donut, and that supplies for advanced moon materials should be set to rise and crash the prices again. So I think it's quite a bit more nuanced than that at the moment. So let's start with crystalline carbonate, clearly recovering back to 160 in the last 10 days or so. We are talking 165 for the sellers, 156 for the buyers. A very nice recovery to, you could either say an average price for the entire year or slightly above average price for the last 9 months or so. So surprise rise for crystalline carbonate, definitely not bad. Next up, we've got ferrite carbide. The exact opposite picture, 1 year low point. How much below 125 are we? 125 for the first seller, 127 for most, 118 for the buyer. So you're buying ferrite carbide for less than 120 ISK. I mean, if you look at this entire chart, it's basically a no-brainer to try and grab some stocks on this. Next up, we have titanium carbide, also declining to a 1 year low point. 162 coming into play, 173 for the sellers, 168 for the buyers. You could wait a little bit longer, but since you were buying well below 175, it would make sense in my opinion. Then we've got tungsten carbide that is also struggling down to 175 here, 178 for the sellers, 166 for the buyers. If you try to get something like that to show, that's all the way down here. Yeah, also pretty low. Obviously a 1 year low point and a potential candidate for some investments in my opinion. So tungsten carbide, ferrite carbide clearly struggling, titanium carbide in a bad spot as well. We've been there before in the first half of the year, and then the surprise crystalline carbonate up in price above average. That is a weird mixed picture. Let's go to the metamaterials then. Photonics actually slowly going up as well. Are we above 17.5k? Yep, 18,000 for the sellers, 16,300 for the buyers. Those are really large margin between sellers and buyers, but sellers can apparently dictate the price from time to time and are above average again. Plasmonic metamaterials are managing to defend a really high price point of above 22,000 ISK. Not bad at all. 23,000 in fact for the sellers, 22,000 for the buyers. That is such a mixed picture. This is clearly a great price if we consider this 1 year chart, and it's managing to defend that very well despite the fact that the carbides here are crashing down. Very nice surprise actually. And then we have the non-linear metamaterials that have been struggling a bit more, but at the tail end you can see we are staying away from the 1 year low point of 20,000 ISK, 23,000 for the sellers, 22,000 for the buyers. And then we've got the terahertz metamaterials that have also been struggling and are actually bouncing off. This is so different. Look at photonic and plasmonic. not bad. And then you get terahertz metamaterials, a two-step crash from September, from a 1-year high point of 27.5k to a 1-year low point of 17.5k. We're slowly recovering that, but we're still basically trading at that low point. 21,000 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. We're in the process of trying to recover, but this is like really a double hit that caused the price to crash really badly, which is completely counter to what we see, for instance, with the plasmonics that have been able to defend these prices really well. So still a very mixed picture here so far. Fermionic condensates staying at 90,000 disc. Basically we got a dip, a recovery, and we're back to that below average price. 88,000 for the sellers, 88,000 for the buyers. Zero margin then. Lots of these others have large margins. This one has zero margin pretty much. Very interesting. Also a big difference. Ferrogel 1-year low point, super pronounced here. So if you want to buy something, grab some Ferrogel for less than 40k. I think it does make sense. Also, don't go crazy with the volumes. You may be stuck with it for a long time, but this is a really clear 1-year low point. Fullerenes are now staying just above 1,000 disc on average, 1,000 for the sellers, 978 for the buyers. Very narrow margin as well, but at pretty much an average 1-year price. Hypersynaptic fibers below 12k, so definitely below average on this one, but not, well, just recovering from a crash as well to 1-year low point. Not really seeing that much of volume buying, so investors, they grab the very cheapest ones, like this little bit here, this little gully here, but other than that, they're very hesitant to move this up anymore. Nanotransistors, ooh, that is a sharp drop off, but it must be said, of course, nanotransistors was able to defend throughout all of fall and even the end of August a price of 6,000 disc, which was pretty much the only advanced PM material that was trading at 1-year high points, and it was because of a complete lack of supply. We had a final little boost to 6,500. That's when supply started to come in, and we're back to 5k, which is the normal price for nanotransistors. 5,200 for the sellers, 4,700 for the buyers. This has basically been one nice bubble that anyone that still had some nanotransistors lying around just had like a 20% profit that they could have taken right there, and we're now just back to normal situation for nanotransistors. A pretty sharp drop off here though, and that is pretty cool. Phenolic composites struggling, clearly below average, but always bouncing off from the 1750 low points. Almost 2k now for the sellers, 18k, almost 2,000 for the sellers, 1,800 for the buyers, but still that's below average. Then we've got ceramic fibers, 1-year low point yet again, going down to 300 disc here, 320 for the sellers, 280 for the buyers. That is a lot below the entire chart here, 280 all the way down here. Yeah, this looks very scary, of course, as well. I have to be honest, some of these low points look very scary, but to me, I think that some small investments here would make a lot of sense. And this is a very mixed situation in the advanced moon materials, in my opinion. So make your bets, and yeah, we'll see what the future brings. Next up, we have the Tech 2 ship markets coming in at 32.35. Alright, let's go over these. I think on average they will be struggling because we have had 1-year low points, and I don't really see major battles or anything like that that would indicate, alright, someone is going to buy a couple of stealth bomber fleets, or even more than that, lots of logic being lost or anything like that that need to be replaced in short order. No, I think we are still in the troubling times with lots of supplies and not too many buyers. So the Aries slowly going down from 27.5 million, 26.8 for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers, and here 170, 23, 33. You can clearly see that we've got really ample supplies of these Tech 2 ships that are slowly driving the price down. The Basilisk had a bit of a bump after reaching a 1-year low point, so here of course too much supply, 1-year low point, some investors move in, we get a bit of a bump, but what immediately takes over is fresh supply, so we're already down to 208 million, 185.7 pretty much still for the buyers, so still buying these very cheaply. And so you can see, let's see where the bump went to. Average price here 220 million, so went up to basically 230, right? Purchasing of investors, then 220, very quickly 209, very quickly back down to lots of supplies at a much lower price. So it is very difficult to actually make those trades at these peaks, of course, but you get a volume increase right here, so you get lots of buying up to a certain price point, and then supply takes back over. So that is still within the expected pattern. Same thing here with Cerberus, right? A little bit of a dip to a 1-year low point of 210 million. Recovery, here are the volumes, and now supply comes back. So we are, what was the peak, 240, and we are now back down to 235 on supply. And you can see here 250, 254 probably the cutoff point, and get a couple sellers at 240, but supply is coming in, driving the price back down, and buyers, they're comfortable to stay at 215, which is pretty damn low right there. Next up, we've got the Crow, same thing, right? 27.5 million shooting up, but right here at the tail end, more supply, so 29 million. Look at that, 330, 59, 27. Couple of sellers just 1 day ago and 2 days ago, making up for like 300-400 crows, putting more pressure on the price at 28.9 million, 26 million for the buyers. The Guardian, that's a surprise and a very welcome one, of course. If you bought your Guardians for less than 200 million ISK, you can right now try to sell them for 263 million, 224 for the buyers. This is definitely an opportunity that you could take advantage of. That's not bad, right? Buy for less than 200, sell for 262. I would say yes. Did I buy Guardians? Well, quickly take a look. Yeah, I actually got a Guardian at 100, or I was trying to buy a Guardian at 180. I'm not sure. Yeah, it must have triggered. Okay, that could be a trade that I'll try. 80 million profits on a Guardian sounds pretty good, so I need to get to my other account. You can see that I also bought Stealth Bombers at 22. So surprise strong performance here. Guardian well above average, selling right now for 260 plus million, but we've seen from the previous ships this will not last long, so I'll try to jump on that, but if I fail, well, then we'll just wait the next spike. That happens as well, of course. The Heretic interdictors have been struggling for like pretty much the entire year, so we're gonna go over these pretty quickly. Just look at the buy price, 60 million. We've been there for pretty much the last 8 months or so, I think. So unless CCP makes a move on changing the interdictors, I don't expect anything to happen there. Then we've got the Hound that is still struggling below 25 million. So on this dip, or was it on this dip that yeah, on this one I think I bought for 22 million. Now 25.2 million for the sellers, so we're already up at 21.1 million for the buyers. So you can even you can try to buy Hounds for less than my investment and make an even bigger profit on an eventual spike, which I'm hoping for, of course. The Ishtar had a really good October, struggling went back down, but is actually recovering already. So we're still commanding 234 million for the Ishtar, for the sellers 215 for the buyers. It's definitely an average to above average price, so not bad for the Ishtar, not super cheap at the moment. Manticore Stealth Bomber still struggling as well, going back down to less than 25 million. I bought these for Manticore 22 million. We're currently talking 24 million for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers. So I basically bought too early. You can definitely buy below my investment, and if I find a way to sell at a better price, of course you can too then normally. Here the Munin, a bit of a different story. CCP intervention, we get a clear trend break in the price. We're going down to 1 low point of 200 million ISK, and that is because CCP is nerfing the Munin, and that's my brother coming online. He'll have to wait a little bit longer. 211 million for the sellers, 192 for the buyers. So this is actually a CCP nerf that is causing a 1 year low point suddenly in the Munin, one of the most popular apparently heavy assault cruisers in the 0-0 doctrines. Next up, we get the Nemesis, bought for 22 million. You can see that the struggle continues here as well. 24 million for the sellers, 20 million for the buyers, and a complete lack of buyers. So you can still make some really nice Stealth Bomber investments if you want to. Perhaps what's happening here though, perhaps I should put in one warning, and the reason why I'm not going to increase the amount of stealth bombers that I bought is that people are expecting, we know from EVX that CSP is at least thinking about plans of doing like sort of an anti-capital bomber, that if that happens and it's a new ship type or an existing ship type, lots of people are thinking battle cruisers that are going to get that role. This could really drive down the usage of stealth bombers, and so perhaps that is something that the market is trying to calculate, but right now in my opinion it's just oversupply and a bit of a lack of demand because there's not enough action around that is driving the price. So as long as it's that, then there is chance on some Nosec action that will see a return on this investment. But if a part of what the stealth bombers do now does get taken over by a new ship that is focused more on like an anti-capital stealth bomber or bomber, then of course we could be in for bad news as well. It's always a risk, of course. The Oneros going back down to a less than average price, 203 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers, clearly showing a lack of demand here again. Then we get the Purifier that is recovering above 25 million, 26 million for the sellers, still 22 million for the buyers. And I bought these for Purifier, trying to buy Purifier. I got these for 22 million. Yeah, basically I got all of them for 22 million except the Nemesis. I bought that one for 21 million. I still think it's going to be potentially a good purchase. This is a surprise. Saber, interdictor. Normally you're not supposed to move. You actually went down to 1 year low point around 62 million. Actually shot up to 72 million, 71 million for the sellers, but 62.7 for the buyers. So do we see a volume? Yeah, we do see a bit of volume here. So some purchasing from investors on the Saber. In my opinion, if you do this right now for the Saber or the Heretic, you're gambling that CCP is going to do something for these ships. Next up, you've got the Scimitar, slowly going up in price away from the 200 million. We're talking 217 for the sellers, but 187 still for the buyers. So this is basically volumes, not that much. I'm a bit surprised that we don't see more volumes on this increased price, but basically a bit of a recovery from a low point of 200 million on average. But the buyers, they're not budging, 187, which is well below the entire chart. And then we get the Stiletto. Bit of pressure at the tail end here as well. We're talking 28.5 million for the sellers, 25.8 for the buyers. A bit more balanced here, supply demand wise. So the Tech 2 ship market is clearly, in my opinion, I always have to try to put in the right warnings, because I'm like, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know all the facts either, of course. But in my opinion, the Tech 2 market is struggling from just a lack of demand. We get quite a bit of oversupply. This is creating opportunities, and once a big war happens in Nosec, in my opinion, these could show some very nice returns. Next up, the Tech 3 ship market coming in at 4150. And that one, oops, excuse me, I'm not supposed to hit the microphone. That one was, in my opinion, struggling with oversupply, especially on the destroyer market. So let's see if that is continuing. The trend was that for most of the year, in fact, at this point, we had a very nicely supplied market where a bit of buying would increase the price, which would then drive manufacturers to bring more of these ships to the market, which would bring it back in line to the 38 to 40 million range, and we've been able to stay there very well. We could see the dynamic. Sometimes the Confessor went to high points, then the others tended to be a little bit lower. We saw supply come in for the Confessors, which would then have like an opposite move, which you can see for here, for instance here with the Hecate. Very, very nice dynamic, healthy market. Unfortunately, in the last couple of months, supplies have been increasing. We've seen, like, I don't know, 60, 70 ships all of a sudden come to the market in a single sell order, and that has clearly been too much for the market, and so we've gone down to an average price of 35 million here. And then the big thing is, how much more supply do we see coming in every single day? And unfortunately, here is the Confessor, 35.7 million for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers, clearly trading pretty low at the moment, and despite that, in the last 24 hours we get 117 here, and the latest sell order is still of 50 ships, which is way too much for the market to absorb. So we clearly are still in an oversupply situation. Then we get another 93, another 55. This used to be these high volumes were like in the 20s, and you got maybe as many as these right here. Everything else was sub 10 or something like that. So we're still oversupplied in the confessor. We're continuing to put pressure on the price here, because despite the fact that we're at this pretty low point of almost getting towards 35 million, they're still dumping a couple hundred confessors in a day. Next up, we've got the Hecate. That's an even worse chart. Why? Because we started off higher. We're still at 37.5 million on average, trying to defend the price better. But same thing here in fall. We are clearly going away from a market that moves a little bit, right, with peaks, and then we get declines on new supply. But as this decline happens here in February, what do we see here for the confessor? A slight uptick to 40 million is to an above average price rate. So you had this dynamic that was working here at the tail end. You just get a decline. And the reason is right here, 37.7 million for the sellers, 32 million, a bit below that for the buyers. And despite that, 146 still and 75 being brought in the last 24 hours. Here this as well, 122, another 100 plus sell order. Yeah, this is just too much for the market. We are clearly oversupplied. That pressure expected to continue. Next up, we get the Jackdaw, same thing. Pressure at the tail end, 35 million, getting close to that on the chart. 37 million for the sellers, 34 million for the buyers. Here it's a little bit less bad, 50-27. This is quite a bit better, so the Jackdaw has a little bit of breathing room. But the bad news, of course, is that the confessor is now down to 35 million. The Hecate, is pretty quickly, in my opinion, working its way towards that, because we're just breaking through 37 million here on the average prices as well. Supplies are just gonna start to move to the Jackdaw, crash that price down again as well. And it doesn't even have that much room. 37.5 for the sellers, but 34 million for the buyers. Is basically 2 million more than the others. And then finally we get the Zwepel, that is also trading around 35 million at this point, 36 million for the sellers and 32 million for the buyers. And here you can see that we've suffered a little bit earlier with oversupply. Everything is drying up quite a bit more in the Zwepel, trying to recover. But yeah, it's at 34 million instead of at 40 million, unfortunately. And here this is quite a bit, right? If even 50% of this moves to Jackdaw and another 50% of maybe the Hecates move to the Zwepel, you get a big problem in both of those markets as well at these below average prices. So I'm still seeing oversupply. It's not too bad. Oh, and there's actually someone here in the radio. But yeah, I think I saw one yesterday. I knew. Let's give him an 07. Welcome to Eve Talk. Smiley. So yeah. Oops, misclicked, but alright. Yeah, oversupplied in the destroyer market. It is still happening. It is right now really focused on the confessor and the Hecate, but I really don't think that the Jackdaw and the Zwepel can like get away from this and maybe recover to 40 million or anything like that. The move is just going to go, the pressure is just going to start to move if these go too low to these two ships as well. Then we've got the cruisers, which were also at low points but have been recovering in the last 2 weeks or so away from, gotta be said, 1 year low points. We've got the Legion that went to less than 140 million ISK, now selling for 157, but the buyers, they're not budging, 132. And here you can clearly see that it is because we get at least somewhat less supplies. It's still 46 ships into sell orders, but for the rest of it, there's just not a lot of new Legions coming to the market, giving the price a little bit of room to go back up. But of course, this is just normal as well. Who the hell is going to dump Legions when you have sell prices of less than 140 million ISK? Not a lot of people, of course. The Loki is the same thing, so we get this lull as well. A bit more supply still in 24 hours, it's almost a full page, coming in at 178 million for the sellers, 164 for the buyers. These have been forced up a little bit, so slightly better situation for the Loki. It is of course the most popular Tech 3 cruiser at the moment. Then the Proteus is already stalling on its increase. So let's see, the Loki trying to get back to average, still a bit below that, but it is definitely trying. The Proteus not coming close to an average price, 150 million for the sellers, 118, 119 still for the buyers, and they're willing to be patient. And of course, Proteus is the least popular ship. Couple dozen or a couple of sellers of 25 are going to just keep the price in check very easily, so there's no need to try and compete in the buy prices there, unlike the Loki. Whereby prices right bottom 130, buyers already up to 164. And then finally we've got Tengu that is also recovering slowly but hesitating at a below average price, 144 for the sellers, 136 for the buyers. A bit more move here as well, in my opinion, for the buy prices, which is because the Tengu is more popular. It's a great PvE platform. So the Tech 3 ship market, in the cruisers, oversupply is clearly stalling. People are just not bringing new cruisers to the market because of the terrible prices, and so we've got in the most popular one, the Loki, a nice recovery with buyers forced up. In the Legion we've got a recovery with buyers hesitating, and then we've got a slight recovery in the Tengu PvE ship, and the Proteus is still up a little bit, but the buyers are still at 119 million. So that's just kind of a normal situation considering the 1 year low points we were at just a couple of weeks ago. And then yeah, the volumes in the Confessor and the Hecate are still very worrying in my opinion, so we'll have to keep a very close eye on that and see in the upcoming weeks if it continues, or if we have a similar drying up situation happening in the destroyers with potentially a bit of a recovery. But I'm not seeing high prices anytime soon for the Tech 3 ship market. And that leaves us to the extra product, which was a request this week. I think I got an email, if I'm not mistaken, to take a look at the fullerenes. So that's coming in at 5010. Like that. So it's going to be manufacturing and research, materials, gas cloud materials, and then the fullerene. So this is stuff that I think almost exclusively comes from wormhole space. And let's take a look at these fullerite C28. Let's take a quick look at the 1 year chart. Started at 7,500, went up to 11k through the spring, basically. Spring period, Gnostic blackout dropping down to a 1 year low point or trade range of 7.5k again, and here at the tail end, nice recovery. Fullerite C28 back up to 10,000 discs for the sellers, 9,900 discs for the buyers. Those are forced to go up there as well. Very interesting recovery here all of a sudden, trading above average already, quite volatile. And could this be a consequence of the Gnostic blackout? I think that's possible, right? Blackout August, September, people move to other activities. Well, let's go to wormholes, let's go and do some gas cloud harvesting there. Since we get the same local in 0.0 anyways, let's get the more valuable stuff, crashing the price down, stay there for a bit, having to take care of all of these stocks, and now we get a nice recovery. It is possible that it's something completely different as well, but this is a nice move up. Fullerite C32 went to a 1 year low point as well of 15,000 disc here in October, trying to recovering but already struggling at the tail end, and is still trading below 20k. Yep, 20,000 for the sellers, 19,000 for the buyers, so a bit below average on this one, but clearly also a bit of a recovery in November. Fullerite C320 is still at the low point of 50,000 discs, so that one could be buy worthy. 53,000 for the sellers, 49,000 for the buyers, and clearly at the low end of the chart. Very mixed picture here between this recovery and this struggling C320. Then we get C50 slightly recovering at the tail end at this point. 4,000, went to a 1 year low point as well here in October and is slightly recovering. Interesting. Fullerite C540 also at a 1 year low point of 50k. Yep. Then we got C60, slight recovery that is hesitating at the tail end here as well, trading above 2.5, yeah, 2,500 for the sellers, and the same for the buyers. That is basically back on its average price. C70, that is quite an exception. 1 year high point went to 6,000 disc here just about 10 days ago. Is now already working its way back down, but working its way back down very quickly. Couple sellers coming in at 4,400 disc. That's some serious undercutting. That's way worse than what I do when I undercut, so this is kind of bad. But we had a very nice opportunity 10 days ago to sell about 50% above that 4,400 average range here, but it's not the last. Sellers coming in straight for that average price again. C72 also recovering from a 1-year low point. 10,700 for the sellers, 10,700 for the buyers, so you can really quite often dump straight to the average price on this. And then the C84 has also recovered to an above average price of 5,000 disc, and first sellers coming in already dumping the price back down. This is definitely interesting. One thing that I am noticing here in this fullerenes market is that we have the pattern that we used to see in Megasite and Sideline, because this does not come from HiSec. This needs to be important. It is the sellers that dictate the price. If sellers ask 10,000 disc, buyers are forced up to 9,900, no, 10-20% margin between the two. And on some downtrends, so I think this one is back down a bit, you do have margins opening up from time to time, but generally you get a very close buy and sell price, and the sell price is basically what dictates the price, the going price for these goods, which is normal. Of course, you gotta go into remote space, you gotta gather stuff, move it to a trade hub, and so you're the one that's going to dictate the price in that specific situation. A few of them are struggling, quite a few of them are actually recovering from low points, which makes it interesting to see that C320 is still trading for 50k when C50 is recovering from that, C28 is recovering from that as well. So this could be a buy opportunity at this point when some of these are at these low points, but this is still a market that is an import market for JITA, and thus these sellers they decide on the price, which means that for, which one was it here, the blue one, something like this can happen as well. It looked like, all right, we're doing great, we're gonna have a 50% profit here on fullerite C70. You're too late. Someone immediately undercuts and says, nope, we're back to that average 4,400 disc, and we're not gonna move away from that. And that is just going to crash the price back down, and it's gonna stay right back here. So very a far more risky market to do trades in, a far better market for people that actually produce this stuff, because they do get to dictate the price, but potential returns, of course, here in very short order. You had a 50% increase in price from 4,400 to around 6,400 discs, so that is of course a very different market. So the general trend here, well, we're just coming off of a very low fall season for a lot of these. I'm seeing some recovery and some that are still at bottom prices, with basically late bottomers that might be worth looking into when it comes to making some investments, like here as well, the C540, right, November dip, so that could be interesting, and all the others are recovery, so there could be a recovery in the books for these as well. But this is a completely different market from most of the others I check. This is still one that is dominated by the producers. They have the power here to dictate the prices, and which is often shown by the buyers being super close to those sell prices as well. Very interesting suggestion. Not a market that I know too much about. Perhaps I need to do a little bit more wormhole diving myself, but for now, yeah, the Invasion Chapter 2 is coming, so that's really what I'm looking forward to in the upcoming weeks. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.